WMR Local 4 News, your local election headquarters. This is Politics Today.
Election night is done, except for a few races that have gone into a runoff. We'll have details on those. And we'll meet a female rancher gaining recognition for her work, her message to other young ladies. Good Sunday morning. Thanks for joining us. Last weekend, we had election night, and a few of those races are now headed into a runoff. The race for Amarillo City Council member place 3 is in a runoff. Incumbent Tom Sherlin and challenger David Prescott campaigning through runoff election day, which is June 7th. During Saturday's election, Councilman Sherlin received 47% of the vote, while Prescott received 45%. A runoff happens when a candidate fails to receive 50% of the vote plus 1. Politics Today's Jack Kessler spoke with both candidates.
With this runoff, incumbent Tom Sherlin says he was ready, win, lose, or draw.
You never know. Until the citizens vote, you never know. I was up for it if we had a runoff, and if we didn't, I was up for winning or losing.
Prescott says he wasn't surprised that the race went into a runoff.
When Nooney Perez joined at the last minute, right there at the last minute, I knew that we would go into a runoff. And with an incumbent that is liked by a lot of folks, a runoff was not surprising.
We asked both men how they were feeling going into the runoff.
Positive. Already, it's a brand new ball game. Nothing is carried over from the last campaign. It's a brand new campaign. We've got to get out. We've got to work the people. We've got to get out and know what their wants and needs are. And the thing is, we've got to deliver to the needs of our citizens.
What's going to be different this time is we're going to really be just looking at who's the better candidate to take care of what's going on in the city. And what's going on in the city, what are the big ticket items right now?
As the two men campaign for the June runoff, they speak on what they hope constituents can take away as they seek their vote.
Take all of the mailers and all of the social posts and all that nonsense and put it aside. Look at two individuals and what their track records have been for the city as private citizens, as businessmen, and make an informed decision. I hope that the constituents look at long-term Amarillo, not just a short 2-year stint.
I'm the same Tom that they elected 2 years ago. I'm the same Tom that holds meetings every other week with the citizens. I'm the same Tom that's out every day in every neighborhood, every community, talking and visiting with the neighbors to find out what their wants and needs are. That's what we got to live toward, is the citizens. Citizens dictate to me what I need to do.
Sherlin and Prescott will have about 6 weeks to continue campaigning before the runoff. We sat down with both men before Election Day for an in-depth interview on what they want to do if they win. We have those waiting for you right now over on our website, myhighplains.com. Canyon City Commissioners continue discussing pay raises and the pay scale for police officers and firefighters. This is to help retain those great first responders instead of losing them to Amarillo, Pantex, or other departments. They also want to move to a step-based pay system so first responders can look at what they'll be making during their years of service.
Converting to the step-based plan, we can show these officers, hey, you're on a step, it's fully funded, here's what you're making as a starting officer, here's what you're making in 3 years, here's what you're making in 5 years. That recruiting method has really taken off in the rest of the other agencies. We're just trying to catch up.
Well, this is just a discussion item at this point. City officials say they'll go into budget discussions and weigh what they can do without raising taxes but paying first responders competitively. Texas lawmakers are nearing the end of their legislative session. Governor Greg Abbott spoke about 7 emergency items he wanted addressed during the session, including school choice, property tax relief, water infrastructure, teacher pay, and bail reform. Speaker of the House, Dustin Burrows, spoke about his continued fight to pass bail reform and property tax legislation and the overall session. The speakers.
We're going to work to try to get across the finish line. Things that people need to always remember is working across the aisle is good, especially when you can find common ground, but it's also necessary. When you're talking about bail reform, it requires a change to the Texas Constitution, which means you have to have 2/3 of the Texas House. It cannot be a partisan vote. So if you do not know how to work across the aisle on things like this or other things in general, you can't get it done. So we're going to continue to work this session and make sure that violent criminals don't get out to do more violent crimes. I'm very hopeful that we can find some common ground and work towards bringing a solution for all Texans. We're going to get property taxes done. I mean, look, there's a budget surplus, even though our budget is not derived from property taxes, right? We do not, as a state of Texas, tax property. That's going to be, your lesser taxing jurisdictions, your cities, your counties, your school districts. However, we know that that is a high burden. And so we're going to put relief in there. We have allocated 15% of our budget, or $51 billion, towards either buying down or maintaining property tax relief for all Texans. We're going to get that across the finish line. The governor, Lieutenant Governor, and I all agree we're going to get this done. We're going to get this done.
That's a big one. There are 7 big ones that Governor Abbott laid out, and one of them is a check beside it right now at the beginning of the session. Do you think if all 7 maybe don't have a check mark a month from now, that you'll be eating turkey in Austin again, or maybe at least in June?
Look, there's only one person who can determine if we've gotten enough work done to be done with this session. And I never try to get in and say what should or should not happen. What I can say is this: the Texas House is working. 70, 80 bills a day are coming out of our chamber. Good bills, conservative bills, bills that are going to invest in the long-term infrastructure of Texas, bills dealing with water, bills dealing with transportation, bills dealing with energy, conservative priorities, healthcare priorities. They are getting there, and I expect many of those and most of those will get to the governor's desk, become law, and I'm very optimistic about where we end on June 2nd.
Is there anything that you have advice for the people back home watching you about what you say, what's really going on? Is there anything they need to keep in mind as they're watching you work, watching everyone here work?
Look, we appreciate people paying attention. This is absolutely a government that does not make policy in a vacuum. We have to get good feedback. So if there's things that people hear, I'm still your representative, please reach out to our office. We'd love to hear from you. But right now, we are so focused on getting big things done, and I can't wait to get home and tell the story of the accomplishments and success of this session for everybody back home.
The speaker also spoke about how large the Texas economy is, so when legislators make big decisions like school choice, the world is watching. Mother's Day is one of the busiest times of the year for florists, but raising tariffs on imported flowers could impact more than just the bouquet. McKenna Earnhardt has the story.
Hello, House of Flowers.
It's peak busy season for flower shops around the country. With Mother's Day this weekend and tech graduation soon, flowers are flying off the shelves.
It keeps us afloat through the summer.
But just as customers buy flowers, florists like Justin Hughes, who has to buy most of his flowers from outside the United States, have now had to think ahead.
I stocked up on all of our containers ahead of time because I knew the tariffs were coming. But yes, some of our flower costs have gone up.
A majority of flower imports come from countries like Colombia and Ecuador. And Hughes just got this email about one of his orders, letting him know that there's now a 5% tariff surcharge on all flowers and greens. But Hughes says it's more than just the flowers he's worried about now.
One of our container suppliers, we get some colored glass from him, and that's going to be 4 to 5 months out because it's stuck on a boat coming from China.
But the floral orders keep coming, and stems keep getting trimmed. And while he loves what he does, he knows the next thing to see cuts are his profits.
Flowers are a luxury, basically, and people are going to spend on their necessities rather than their luxuries.
We heard the Texas Speaker of the House talk about bail reform, and Governor Abbott met with several people this past week to hopefully get his priority from the chamber to reality. We'll hear about those meetings next. The state of Oklahoma is using the tragic story of an Amarillo student to hopefully save the lives of others. The Emerson Kent Cole Act is heading to the governor's desk. You'll remember Emerson died in 2023 after suffering an allergic reaction while at Amarillo ISD school. Now, that act requires that when epinephrine is administered, the nurse or school employee has to call 911 as soon as possible and call a parent or guardian as soon as possible as well. It also updates the mandatory training that certain medical or school staff have to complete before the school year begins. Since the start of the legislative session, Governor Greg Abbott has argued for stronger bail restrictions, declaring the issue an emergency item this session. He's also throwing his support behind two proposed constitutional amendments, one to give judges more power to keep people accused of violent felonies held without bond, and another to require those accused of a felony who are illegally in the country to be held without bond. As Capitol correspondent Adam Schwager reports, Abbott is now taking an even stronger stance.
In a joint press conference with victims of criminals who were out on bond and the author of the Senate and House bail reform efforts, Governor Greg Abbott said that bail reform should go further than what the Senate has already passed.
Judges must automatically deny bail for violent crimes like murder, rape, and human trafficking unless there is clear and convincing evidence that the defendant will appear in court and not endanger the community.
The proposed constitutional amendment, which passed the Senate, gave judges discretion to hold those criminals without bail. But now Abbott says the burden should be on the defendant to show why they're not a threat to the community, rather than the prosecution to show why they are a threat. To do this, Abbott will have to convince 12 House Democrats to join on to a proposed constitutional amendment, votes which Abbott hinted he might not have yet.
There is progress, but not sufficient progress being made with discussions.
Senate Jurisprudence Committee Chair Joan Huffman said,
"We are done negotiating. The governor has laid out perfectly what the bill is going to do."
And House Jurisprudence Chair John Smithee said the bail reform bills will get out of committee this week.
If we don't make a deal, then we're going to go to battle.
And if Abbott's battle over bail reform isn't won by the time session ends on June 2nd, don't count out a special session.
We'll make decisions like that as they arise.
In Austin, I'm Adam Schwager.
From spending to spending cuts, tariffs, and the Farm Bill, Representative Jody Arrington spoke on those issues. You'll hear from him next. Not just awaiting legislation on the state level, but important legislation on the national level. Representative Jody Arrington spoke about some of the biggest issues in D.C.
So I'll ask you first about this reconciliation process and where you are and how do you get to the cuts that you've been wanting to see?
Well, this is the most consequential piece of legislation in modern history, certainly my lifetime, because it has the pro-growth policies that get our economy off of high center, that unleash prosperity for generations to come. We cannot accept less than 2% annual growth rate. That's we've had over 3% over the last 50 years. We have to grow and prosper. Our economic success is the power base for our global leadership. That's the first point. Secondly, we have to offset the cost of tax cuts, of defense spending, of the tools and resources we give the president for securing the border, all the first and most important job of the federal government. But we have to take care to offset those costs by growth, revenue to the Treasury, and spending reduction. And there's a lot of waste in this government. $7 trillion is the federal budget, and it's grown by 60% since COVID. And 90% of the growth in spending is coming from entitlements, mandatory programs that are on automatic spend. And this is our last best chance, in my opinion, to start to bring that down, grow the economy, restore fiscal health, and give my children and the children and grandchildren of your viewers a fighting chance at the American promise. How do we get there? We get there by doing common sense reforms to root out waste and fraud in this government. We do that by having reforms that actually serve the most vulnerable in Medicaid or food stamps. We don't trap people in dependence on the federal government. That is inhumane. That is un-American. So we do it because there's that much waste, because the opportunity is so great, and because the consequences of us not acting in this moment would be devastating and I think irreparable to the country's future.
Speaker Johnson seemed to talk about the Medicaid and the $880 billion that you want to cut from there. He said you're not going to touch Medicaid for people who need it. He said you're not going to adjust the federal percentage that the federal government contributes. And then waste and fraud, you got a CBO report that talked about how much is there. So where do you find the rest of that $880 billion?
Well, there's $1.5 trillion that I can rattle off the top of my head that doesn't impact the most vulnerable Americans on Medicaid who need it and depend on it. And in fact, if we deploy these reform initiatives, we will strengthen the program and make it sustainable. To date, none of these welfare programs, and there are almost 100, and they cost a total of over $1.5 trillion of that $7 trillion budget. They're not sustainable. So we have to do something to address the sustainability of it.
We'll continue our discussion with Representative Arrington after the break. He also talks about the important Farm Bill and could states share the cost of SNAP and other programs. Keep it here. Welcome back. We continue our discussion with Representative Jody Arrington from right here in Texas. He is speaking about tax cuts and the Farm Bill. Take a listen.
And do you think we'll get a Farm Bill before September of this year?
I believe we will get a Farm Bill for a couple of reasons. We have a president and now a Republican Senate who will act and with a sense of urgency to provide a modernized Farm Bill and an updated safety net that reflects the new economic reality after Biden inflation. I mean, the fact is, the problem with the current Farm Bill safety net is it doesn't work when your fuel and your seed and your fertilizer and all your input costs have gone through the roof because we've experienced 40-year high inflation. So there is an urgency by this president. We had to deal with Democrats in the Senate. We passed the Farm Bill out of the House. The Senate did not. So, make your own conclusions. Now we have unified Republican leadership, number one. Number two, we have a president that has been for the farmer and has proven to have our farmers back and to support them. And number three, I think that reconciliation, the budget reconciliation process, will actually allow us to address some of the problems with the Farm Bill that we never address and that hang it up. Mainly, we rarely ever address the problems, the loopholes, the shortcomings, the games and fraud with food stamps, which is 80% of the cost of a Farm Bill, like $100 billion a year. So if we deal with those things in reconciliation, and we tighten them up, and we have responsible program integrity, responsible work requirements for those capable of working, I think you're going to see a much smoother takeoff on the new Farm Bill.
Is there any discussion about states sharing the cost of those food stamps or of SNAP benefits?
There's a conversation going about states sharing the cost of a lot of programs that the federal government funds entirely. And at the risk of bankrupting the country because we don't have a balanced budget requirement that the state of Texas and almost every state in the union has. The other piece of this is we have to have some skin in the game for responsible behavior and for accountability to ensuring that the monies flow to the beneficiaries, not to people who are here illegally, not to fraudsters. And the only way to do that ultimately is to make sure that states have a shared responsibility. With that, they get flexibility. With that, they have the freedom to implement it in a way that they think best suits their community's needs.
We'll wrap things up after a quick break. Don't go anywhere. More than $22 million will go to improve the water system in the city of Paducah. The money was awarded by the Texas Water Development Board. $2.2 million of that is in financing. The other $20 million is in grant funding. The city is expected to replace water lines, including the main one that takes water from the well to the treatment facility. You can always stay up to date on the latest political news with us by checking out our website. It is myhighplains.com. Plus, we're out there on social media. I do want to throw this out there. Runoff election, June 7th. Mark that on your calendar. Get out there and vote, and we will see you back here next week.